You're feeling stressed, you're feeling agitated, you're feeling like a fake version of yourself now that you're back home for the holidays, and it is not the most wonderful time of the year. It's a conversation that you may not be having with your friends, but it's a conversation that we're going to have today. What do you do when you're back with the people who caused you pain in the past? How do you deal with the moral conflict of either telling them the truth of what you've been learning this year about the ways that you were hurt, the ways that it didn't work between you, or do you keep your mouth shut? Do you hold it in just for these few days? Do you endure the temporary agony of keeping it all to yourself? That's what we're going to try and resolve in today's video. I'm going to show you a few different methods according to this framework of truthfulness and resentfulness to give you what you need to make your own ethical decision of how to navigate the family conflicts at this very difficult, very charged, and often very emotionally heavy time of year for somebody who didn't grow up in a happy family. It's going to be a difficult conversation. Fundamentally, we're going to be reminded that home is where we start from, and even if it's been 20, 30 or 40 years since the difficult things happened, we have a few decisions to make to get ourselves through this holiday season. You've got two choices fundamentally. Choice number one, you force your family to adapt to your expanded sense of self. Choice number two, you force yourself to be contained and constricted temporarily to the old family dynamic. Two choices. Do you force everyone else to change, or do you temporarily force yourself to change? You might reject the word force. If you've been interested in conscious communication, you're doing inner child healing, you're doing active imagination, you're working on your body, you're doing breath work and meditation, you might say, Jordan, that's too strong a language. I shouldn't force anyone. And yet, if you really pay attention to what's happening when you're starting a conversation, when you're bringing up that difficult moment with your mother, your father, your auntie, your uncle, your brother, your sister about the thing that happened in the past, you are forcing the conversation. You don't just bring it up and it's completely laid back and invitational. You force the conversation. Even the moment of bringing something up from the past, even if it was 30 or 40 years ago, it's forcing the conversation. And that's okay. It's okay to express agency and willpower and say, hey, I've been reflecting on what's happening. I need to talk about this with you. Maybe you're seeking an apology. Maybe you're seeking to express some forgiveness, or maybe you just want to open up a level-headed, grounded dialogue with your adult parents, your adult family members, as the adult that you are today. Or, conversely, you choose to go on the opposite side, which is you're forcing down that instinctual uprising to try and express the truth that you've been learning throughout all of this year. Maybe you've been reading people like Donald Winnicott. Maybe you've been reading the inner child books that I've been recommending on the channel. Maybe you've learned about codependency and addiction and psychosomatic wounding. You're going to have to keep all of that in if you choose option 2. How do you make the decision? There's no right decision. Fundamentally, there's no right decision. But what I want you to do is work across this very wonderfully detailed diagram of truthfulness and resentfulness. What you can see is that I've written down the shorthand versions of very true, very resentful, not very true, not very resentful. And we've got a little framework of possibilities. So for me personally, I think the top possibility is that you share something which is very true, but not resentment making. So, for example, you can share something like, I understand what happened in the past, blah, 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 and there's no sense of resentment inside you because you've already processed everything. It's a 2-minute conversation and you're back in the family dynamic. That is the ideal, optimal situation. You said something that's very true. You may be tilted towards option 1, which is you're going to force the conversations, you're going to bring up an abusive moment where there was shouting, there was abuse, there was neglect, whatever it is, but you've pre-processed. During this year, you pre-processed. You haven't seen a family member in many months, and now you share the truth in a way that doesn't have that charge of resentfulness. Inversely, you might choose to say nothing. You maintain your truth on the inside, but you still don't feel resentful because you've learned the lesson that they don't need to change. They don't even need to acknowledge what went wrong for you to have your peace. That is, for me, the highest possible timeline right there. Very true, not resentful. And then alternatively, we have very true, very resentful. That's you getting it off your chest. You're still in the middle of the overcharge. You're learning what happened, and very rightfully so, you're upset about it. You're angry, you're grieving. It's true, but there's a lot of resentment inside you. If you're in that situation, you can go either way. You can either force the conversations, or you can force yourself to keep it to yourself for just maybe a few more months, or at least until next Christmas comes around. Do a bit more private processing. If the resentment is already there and you're feeling that toxicity, you need not spill that out over the Christmas dinner table. It might not be the wise move. I'm not saying that you need to deny your truth. I'm not saying that you need to pretend that the bad things didn't happen. I'm just looking to try and maintain the peace. If it's a temporary environment, if it's just a few days at this time of year, and you're already seeing these conflict patterns coming up inside of you, you know that you're becoming a weaker, more frustrated, more juvenile version of yourself compared to your everyday self from just a few weeks ago. It's a very, very, very strong indicator that the resentment and the hostility and the bleeding trauma is still leaking out of you. And if you're approaching difficult conversations with your family members with that energy being very available to the overall energetic space between you, the interpersonal space, don't be surprised when they're bleeding, leaking, agitated, denying, avoidant, neglectful, aggressive energy comes right back with you. If you're bleeding black sludge, they're going to add their black sludge in comparison. They're going to combine and meet you on the level that you're starting that conversation, which is why I said the very true, not resentful pathway right here. You're sharing a truth. It's open-hearted. You've done your pre-processing. That is the ideal situation to be in at this time of year. Most of us will not have that to the fullest degree, but at least if you're 85, 90% there, you have the ability to maintain the conversation or the ability to keep it to yourself without suffering too much over the holidays. Just watch out for it. If you already know that you're sludgy and you expect that the family member is likewise going to be a little bit sludgy, my personal advice is it's probably best to keep it to yourself. Practically speaking, dump everything into a journal. Take the 5, 10, 15 minutes when the charge is coming up. Excuse yourself from the family situation. Even if you haven't got your journal available, get your phone, go into the notes section, and dump it all out there. Don't dump it over the cheese and crackers. Don't dump it all over the family moment where there's nephews and nieces or your in-laws are around. Don't be the contributor to that situation arising once again. I'm not judging you. I'm not saying that you have to repress your truth. Please, I've experienced these things firsthand. I know what it's like. I've advised clients over the years, always at this time of year, when I see that they've worked through many different things and many months in a row, they get to that moment where they're back with their family. They have to make the moral choice. What other choices do we have? Right down here, we have the not true and very resentful. That's arguably the worst possible situation right down here. Not true. You're lying and you're very resentful. This is when your father says, "Oh, is there anything on your mind that you'd like to talk about?" And you say, no, it's all okay, even though he can see that you're frothing at the mouth or you're completely closed off or you're eating the 20th biscuit in a row. You're clearly disconnected. You're watching the TV. You're scrolling your phone. He makes a bid to start conversation. "Is there anything you'd like to talk about?" And you say, "No, I'm fine. Great lunch we had." You're lying and you're extremely resentful. Alternatively, you could have a situation where you lie, but you're not very resentful because you've already pre-processed. That's a bit of a moral grey zone, but it's a practical grey zone. Again, your father asks you, "Is there anything you want to talk about?" And you remembered something that happened back in the past. You've been processing through some of the anger issues that you had, or maybe some of the anxiety issues, some of the addiction issues, the reason why he wasn't there, why he never came to see you, whatever it might be. But you pre-processed that. So you lie to him and say, "No, there's nothing I want to talk about," even though realistically you kind of would want to have the direct confrontation, but you're not resentful about it. The same with a brother or a sister who did you dirty back in the past, or maybe something happened just 5 years ago. You lie. That's not sugarcoated. You're not just withholding the truth. You're actively lying to your family members to get yourself through the internal agony of the Christmas period. It's very private. No one would know apart from you. It's also a very normal thing, at least from my understanding, in many European and especially American homes, to basically lie consistently to all family members that everything is just fine. You could play that game if you want to play that game. Personally, I have played a variety of all of these games over the years, and depending on the season, depending on the mood of the day, and depending on who I'm talking to in my family or what the group family dynamic might be, they have different success and failure rates. You can't make a perfect choice. What I want you to do is filter your decisions. Filter, again, the basic pathway, zooming all the way out. Choice number 1, force your family to adapt to your new expanded sense of self. Force them to update their firmware. And for example, for me, I am no longer the Jordan from the past. I'm the Jordan in the present. And here's how I want you to treat me. That's the aggressive way of doing it. You can do it in a softer way of, I've been learning some things and I've got some new ideas in place and there's a few conversations I'd like to have with you. They're kind of difficult, but would you be open to talking about them? Of course, this works if you're in conversation with someone who isn't blind drunk or high off their face or whatever it might be at this Christmas time. You have to assume their level of consciousness to maintain this kind of conversation. It might not be the best choice for you. You have that possibility, that whole realm of possibility. You force them to adapt to you, or you keep it on the inside. You put it in your journal, you go talk to your therapist, you go back home, and you read the books, and you just let it pass. But the complication comes a little bit sooner than you might expect. You may have already gotten a feel for this as I was explaining the various options, because it's not just about you. Fundamentally, this framework of very true, very resentful, not very true, very resentful, the 4 possibilities of truth and resentfulness, I've only framed it on your terms so far. And it gets a little bit more tricky when you consider that it's not just the individual truth, but it's your father's truth and your father's resentfulness, your mother's truth, your mother's resentfulness, your aunties, your uncles, your cousins, your brothers, your sisters, your nieces, your nephews, your in-laws, maybe even the family dog. How truthful is your family dog? How resentful is the family cat? Everyone gets involved at this time of year. For better and for worse, everyone gets involved. That's why it's such a charged situation. Imagine what's happening if everyone's playing different games. Eric Berne, the founder of transactional analysis, a psychoanalytic theory, I think in the 1950s, wrote a very famous book called The Games People Play. And Christmas time is the most obvious time where it's not just checkers and board games or playing video games on the console with your young nephew. It's the games we're playing on the inside in terms of how truthful and how resentful we're actually experiencing ourselves and experiencing everyone else in the environment. It's one of the most difficult personal dynamics to be in because it's not even an organic situation. Let's say, for example, to make this practical, you're going in with the game of I'm going to be truthful and not resentful. You have done your inner work. You have arrived at the family season right there. Very true, not resentful. Right here, you are in the pristine position to show up into the conflict zone. How many hours can you maintain that composure? How many days in a row can you hold the grace of being understanding and patient if your father comes in with lies, your mother comes in with resentment, your brother comes in with a mixed dynamic, and your sister, she is nowhere to be seen, but occasionally she comes in and makes a big statement and then leaves again, and it gets more and more complex. How many days can you maintain that graceful stance? For most people, not many days, and quite truthfully, not many hours. I see it quite predictably with the clients that I've worked with. They go in with the best of intentions, but 10 to 15 minutes in the conversation, the knife was twisted, it hit a particular inner child wound, and they have regressed, and maybe they're shouting, maybe they're fallen back into addiction. It's very, 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 very difficult. The safest possible pathway, if you're looking for practical advice, if you're going to go back into a family dynamic after you've watched this video, is to probably go for the not true, not resentful pathway. Right down here. Not true, not resentful. And I wish it were different. I wish I could say to you, as a morally upright man, that you should tell the truth to the people that hurt you. that you shouldn't tell a single lie, that you should say, no, actually, I am upset about this thing. You should bring all of your open-heartedness and your consciousness into these low-grade nonsense arguments with your family, or the avoidant cold shoulder situations. I wish I could say that you should just be yourself and you should be authentic above all else. But practically speaking, from the last few years of working with clients very intimately and seeing many different family dynamics playing out, once the Christmas period is over and the clients reflect 2 or 3 weeks later, the number one thing that they say to me is, I wish I had have just kept it to myself. I wish I had have just kept my mouth shut. The little lies, the little white lies of, oh, I'm just feeling tired. Oh no, nothing's wrong, I just had a bit too much turkey. Even though on the inside, you might not be maximally resentful, but you're feeling the charge on the inside, you just keep it in. It's difficult advice for me to give. You're free to reject it if you want to be the morally upright man that maybe I'm not strong enough to be, or my clients tried to be but they didn't succeed, and you think you're the one who can bring in the family dynamic. You've sensed that someone in your family has been doing their inner work and you've got that moment for reconciliation. It's been 10 years of distance, 20 years of distance, an entire lifetime of challenge with this family member. But you can see that they were doing some things. They were reading some books, they were quitting some addictions, they attended a meditation situation retreat. Maybe that's a bit extreme, but maybe they attended a meditation event. Maybe they went to a workshop. Maybe they had a conversation with a friend. Maybe there was a sudden family illness, or they lost a friend due to old age, whatever it might have been, and it woke up a little bit of light, a little bit of hope, a little bit of healing energy. If you've sensed that in them, you might have an opportunity to be truthful and clear the air together. Practically and unfortunately, it's very, very rarely the case. I wish it were different. It usually isn't. I need to pop your bubble of enthusiasm, because the bubble of enthusiasm, if you don't pop it, will likely be popped by someone who does it on your behalf. And it's pretty painful when you've been preparing, arguably since last Christmas, to come back in as a more grounded and more conscious version of yourself and experience that agitation when you don't get to be that version of yourself. Practically speaking, just endure it for the next few days, or alternatively, before I wrap up this video, do take the courageous step forwards, but make sure that it's just a step and you don't overcharge or overswing into some kind of compulsive, naively idealistic, I can heal everything. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm going to be direct. You will regret it, because I really haven't seen it work. I really have not seen it work. What I have seen work is someone opening the door for a bit of conversation with their family and seeing if the family member walks into that conscious conversation. If they don't force them to step into the room with you, because you're very likely going to be in a confined space where the energy gets pretty dark. It's a hard way to end the video. It's not the Christmas spirit that you may have hoped for, but we are talking about family wounds, and we're talking about the fakeness that you feel this time of the year. If you're feeling fake, if you're feeling like you have to say something, say it to your journal, say it to a friend, say it somewhere else. Don't say it directly to their face. And then see how much you can do. As a final reminder, see how much you can do to bring down the resentment levels and bring up the truthful levels. Right here. Very true, not resentful. That's the ideal. But it might not be a possibility this Christmas. It could be something that you do next Christmas. I'm just giving you realistic advice. You're free to take it or leave it. You're free to scroll down in the comment section and see what other people are doing at this time of year and maybe share your story as well. It's the best I can do, but I hope it's given you some kind of moral significance about everything you've been learning about yourself, about your family, throughout all of the hard work that you've been putting in this year, and know finally that this is a temporary situation. You won't feel like this forever. It's a temporary triggering. It's a regression in the service of transcendence, as Michael Washburn would put it. A moment of going down into the darkness before you come out with new perspectives. It will end. You'll go back to your normal life. things will feel safe again. And then you get to enjoy all the inner work that you do next year. You get to enjoy the possibility of feeling like yourself again. It will happen. Go check the comments, see what other people are doing, and if you've enjoyed this video, consider sharing your story down below, and we'll continue the chain of helping each other in this most wonderful time of the year. And at least we can find that within. Even if it's not mirrored without, it can be a wonderful time in the inner home, even if the outer home may not be the place we want to hang out. I'll see you in the next video. I'll see you in the comments section. Good luck.